Taking the High Road podcast, presented to you by Divorce Buddy and CDC Certified Divorce Coach. Welcome to the show. In the Taking the High Road podcast, you'll learn simple strategies for creating a healthy divorce no matter what stage you are at. This podcast also has a companion book available from Amazon.com that includes valuable insights from 11 certified divorce coaches. To learn more, be sure to visit highroadanddivorce.com. Again, that's highroadanddivorce.com. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking to Glenys Reeves. Glenys has worked in the divorce field as a mediator and as a coach. She has a special interest in personal leadership, and during her time as a mediator, she's recognized the need for individuals to remain their best self, to be able to take the high road while transitioning to their new life. So I'd like to welcome Glenys to the show. Glenys, welcome.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm happy to be here.
So Glenys, maybe just share with us a little bit about what you're going to talk to us about today.
So my topic for today is effective communication practices when you're going through a separation and divorce, and the importance of communicating effectively with your former partner, just for your own mental health and to get things through and to move forward.
Excellent. Now, can you share with us a little bit about your personal background and what inspired you to become a divorce coach, really helping others and focusing on the communication aspects?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, Jeremy. I've been involved in family law for a number of years. I did family law mediation for close to 15 years and specifically did a lot of work with people that were divorcing around their parenting plans. It was when I was working in this time that it became really apparent to me that people that were going through separation and divorce needed to express their needs and listen to the other party. And if they were able to do this, they were much more effective at being able to work through their issues and to make this life transition. There's always a lot of an emotion when we go through a separation and divorce, and knowing how to work through this and communicate assertively without getting caught up in the emotion is really essential. I always, used to think about this and would wonder what it would be like for me. And it wasn't until I actually experienced it personally, and even though I knew all the skills necessary to maneuver through, it was a really difficult time, and I really struggled to communicate in a way that was effective for me. So I must admit that I didn't always use the best skills, and I guess that really brought home to me how important this was. So it was at this point in time that I looked at the whole area of divorce coaching and went and did my training, because I think it's really important as much as possible that we display our best self. So with the coaching background, as I do other types of coaching as well, I knew that what an empowering process it could be. And so I just wanted to expand my practice so I could do transition coaching as well. That's how I ended up as a divorce coach.
Well, that's great. So often that we learn kind of from our own experiences, and it inspires ourselves to have learned some of our own lessons and then share that experience with other people as well.
Absolutely.
Now, during divorce, why is it that communication is so important? I mean, obviously communication is important in all aspects of our life, but particularly, in when you conflict and things going on, what makes it even more important?
Well, when a relationship breaks down, there are numerous decisions to be made. I mean, these can be financial decisions, they can be decisions around property, and oftentimes there are children involved, and so there needs to be decisions made in regards to parenting plans. And oftentimes communication hasn't been great in a relationship, and oftentimes that may have led to the actual relationship breakdown. So there's really a need to explore how to communicate during a relationship transition, and a relationship transition that's often really full of a variety of emotions. If individuals that are going through separation and divorce are not able to express their point of view and rationale in negotiations, they often go away really frustrated, and some have really long-term regrets because the decisions are really going to affect their future. Also, when you're needing to develop co-parenting plans, it's important that there's good communication, as this often sets the tone for communication more long-term, because even though you've made the decision to not be a couple anymore, the fact is that you still have to be parents together, and you need to figure out how to do that. So that's why it's really important that there's effective communication through this whole process.
Right. And then also, let's say like when it comes to actually communicating with one's ex, what common mistakes do people make?
Um, well, I think the biggest mistake is we often let emotions override our ability to think logically about what is best for us. And oftentimes, that immediate reaction is not going to get us the long term effects that we need. Really, people are often really angry and really frustrated, and this can get in the way of reason. And we know that when we get angry, physically our body goes into sort of what's called fight or flight. And when this happens, our ability to reason and express ourselves effectively is greatly decreased. And I guess people need to think about, have you ever been angry and said things that when you calm down, you wish you wouldn't have? And that's really because our body has gone into that fight and flight. The other problem, as I mentioned before, is many relationships break down because of poor communication. And it's not realistic to think when you're going through this really emotional time that these previous patterns are going to change unless we consciously take the time to think about this and strategize on how we need to do things differently. And I think that's why coaching is so effective, because everyone does have the capacity to think about how they can communicate differently. And I think a coach can really help individuals explore this and develop actions so they can take this to move forward and communicate differently through this process.
That's great advice in terms of, especially what you're saying, we're in this fight or flight mode. How can we think or behave rationally when we're in that state? So having sort of the guidance of coaching and to help us sort of cultivate self-awareness and know when we're acting one way versus when we're in our sound mind, let's say.
Absolutely, because I mean, a coach's role is to become a partner, become a thinking partner and a learning partner. And by asking powerful questions, it can really change people's perspective and get them to take a look at how they can do things differently. And I think when we look at communication around separation and divorce, that's so, so important.
Maybe you can expound on that in terms of asking the right questions. Kind of segues into my next question in terms of, as a parent, how can I communicate more effectively with my ex? Are there specific questions? Are there specific techniques that I can learn and I can apply to my current situation?
So, of course, there are, and I have done a lot of work around effective communications, especially in conflict. And I think what we have to remember is we call them communication skills for a reason. It's because they are skills based. And when I do programs with people around that, I often talk about, most of us are born with the ability to speak. None of us are necessarily born with the ability to be effective a communicator, because those take skills, just like skills we learn for a job or skills we learn for a sport. We need to understand what they are, we need to practice them, and they need to become part of who we are. And it's the same as a really important part of it is listening. And most of us are born with the ability to hear, but very few of us are born to be really, I like to call it effective. Some people like to call it supportive listeners. So if we want to learn those new skills, absolutely we can. The first thing we need to do is we need to take a look at what our unhealthy patterns of communication are and really be honest with ourselves in regards to how this is affecting our ability to move forward. Because when we get caught up in that anger and that frustration, we can't really move ourselves forward. And when we're going through separation, divorce, it is a transition. And so we want to transition out of that and transition into the new way of doing things. Once we're able to identify what's not working for us, then we need to talk about what might work better. And that's where we can start to discover those new skills and learn ways to practice so they become part of who we are as a communicator. And I always tell people when they're learning new communication skills, don't think you're just going to hear about them and then you're going to get in a real conflictual situation and suddenly they're just going to come to you and you're going to be able to use them. You have to practice them. So you have to think of people that you're safe with practicing. You've got to think about situations that are safe. And effective communication isn't just when something, conflictual is going on. We can practice a lot of these skills in really positive manners as well and positive conversations. And then it just becomes who we are. So some of the communication skills that I've found are really effective for people is first off the whole skill of assertive communication, because that's really asking for what you want in a respectful way. It includes describing a behavior in a very objective, measurable way. It includes including how you feel using what we like to term I language because you own that feeling. It includes talking about what maybe could be done differently and what the change or effect will be if people can do it that way. So there's tools that you can use to learn that, and you can practice it, and people can become very effective that way. Then there's the whole pieces around supportive listening. Oftentimes, as I said before, when people think about listening, they think about hearing, but there's different stages in the listening process. And one of the stages to really understand. So you really have to understand where that other person's coming from. And we do that by asking really open questions and then clarifying back your understanding through paraphrasing. So we listen to understand the other point of view. And, paraphrasing isn't just about repeating back what you hear, but it's also repeating back what you see. Because oftentimes people are giving us a message verbally, but non-verbally they're giving us another message. And if you're really wanting to be a supportive listener, you want to ensure that you're understanding all of those messages. The other thing is you have to really keep an open framework through this. And I often like to use the mantra, you need to stay curious and not judgmental. Oftentimes, the person that we've spent all that time with, our former partner, is the one that knows to trigger us the easiest. And so trying to keep that open mindset, trying to really understand, try not to judge what they say is so important. Once we're able to do that, we can start to reframe it. So start to take a look at opportunities that the situation may present. And I remember that happening for me with a friend when I was really down and really not understanding where I was going to go. And the question was asked to me is, what opportunities might this have? Are you excited about this? And it was a great way to reframe what my new transition was going to look like. And once you're able to look at these opportunities that the situation may present, then you can start to acknowledge. You can start to acknowledge that both of you are having feelings around this and indicate that you're starting to try and understand those feelings. So we often talk about when we're in a conflictual situation, we have to get out of our positions and we need to get down to our interests. Because if I'm positional, what I'm doing is I'm saying this is a solution to the problem. And because we're in conflict, the other person has a different position or a different solution. But if I start to understand what's really important about that solution to the other person, then I am moving to being interest-based, and then I can negotiate on what's important to you, what's important to me, versus offering ultimatums through the conversation.
Yeah, those are great points, and especially as you contrast, positional based versus interest based. And of course, that's a concept in collaborative or any effective mediation. Whereas, like in family court, you have the more adversarial process, and it's always position based.
Absolutely.
Could we maybe do an example?
Yeah, I can certainly think of an example. So you've got two parents, and they're talking about a parenting plan, and they're arguing about the time that needs to be spent at each parent's home. And the one parent throws out, well, the reason I don't want the kids to be at your house during the week is that you don't have an appropriate bedtime. And the other parent is saying, you can't tell me when the kids are at my house, I do things my way, and I think my bedtime's quite appropriate. So if they try to negotiate from that, one saying not appropriate, the other one saying appropriate, they're never going to get anywhere. If you can ask the questions about, so what's important to you about being able to make those decisions when the children are at your house? The one parent may say, well, you know what? I want to feel that when they're at my house, I'm the one that's the parent, and I'm able to have some control over what that relationship and what the routine in the house looks like. And then you may say to the other parent, so you're really talking about bedtime and your concerns about bedtime. And the other parent may say, well, you know what's really important to me is there's consistency. So if I make them go to bed at 8 o'clock and they go to the other parent's house and they don't have to go to bed to 10, there's really inconsistencies around there and I need consistency. Oh, so what we're talking about is I'm hearing that, you'd like consistency and you'd also like to have some control over what that consistency looks like in your homes. So let's talk a little bit about what consistency between the two homes would look like. That's a totally different conversation than arguing about the time that kids need to go to bed.
Right. That's a great point. And just in terms of, clearly there's quite a few benefits there, but how would you say, non-defensive yet assertive communication techniques really will benefit not just the parents, but the children as well?
Well, the problem is like it or not, kids always get caught in the crossfire. And kids, if parents can communicate in an effective way through that assertive communication and then really listen and understand each other, that the kids see that. They see that mom and dad are working together to try to establish some type of a routine that's going to work. Because let's face facts, separation and divorce is a real transition for kids as well. Oftentimes they've been living in one home. Sometimes now they're going to be living in two homes. Sometimes it means maybe they're living in the same home, but mom and dad are coming back and forth. And so I just think as a parent, anytime we can demonstrate communication skills that are more effective through assertive language and supportive listening, we start to do that in all parts of our lives, and the kids actually start to model those as well.
Now, can you share an example maybe of a client that you worked with, a couple, for example, that wasn't communicating effectively and with their ex or whatever, and through their work with you was able to learn and apply these skills?
Absolutely. Through my divorce coaching practice, I've had numerous clients that are in a variety of situations, and what they found is exploring communication patterns and making a plan and how to do things differently has been very effective for them to move forward. Some of these have been clients that are dealing with issues in their professional life and others in their personal life. And when specifically people going through separation and divorce, I have not yet to have one who hasn't wanted to explore what's working and what isn't working in their communication style and strategizing on how this can be changed. And as I said before, the biggest challenge I see with individuals going through separation and divorce is they tend to be easily triggered by the other person. And so when they do, they revert back to old patterns. So sometimes the coaching is around just exploring with them what actually triggers you and what tells you that you've been triggered, and get them really self-aware about how this happens. Because if they can stop it at that point, they're much more likely to be effective as they move forward. So through coaching and the use of powerful questions, they can explore a variety of things. So for example, what occurs when they have a conversation with their former partner and how successful has this been? Talk about times when they felt really positive about outcomes of conversation. This doesn't necessarily always have to be a conversation with their former partner. Sometimes it can be a conversation with someone else that they felt has gone really well. And then they can take a look at what skills they use there and see how they can bring those across. If they can't remember any conversations they felt positive about, then I really like to brainstorm in regards to individuals who they see as really effective communicators and talk about what they've observed in regards to those conversations, and then talk about what from this can they learn and bring into their own communication patterns. The whole exploration between what's positional and what's being interest-based is always a great thing to coach around. And looking forward, so oftentimes I'll ask a question about, so when you look back on this time in your life 5 years from now, what do you want to remember about this? And I think all of us will say that we want to remember being our best selves. And so then you can really talk about, well, what does that need to look like now? So that can be your memory. It has to be action-based in coaching. So you can have a really nice supportive conversation with someone, but at the end of the coaching conversation, they have strategic actions that they understand, things that they can do that are going to move them forward in their ability to communicate effectively. And I always ask questions around, so on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 not being committed to 10, totally being committed to taking this new action, what's your commitment level? And if it's anything less than a 10, then we talk about what needs to change to get them to a 10. Then they need to decide what they're going to do to hold themselves accountable. Maybe we talk about what they're going to do to practice. I had one situation where she was really afraid she was going to be triggered. So we strategized around how she was going to work with her lawyer. So her lawyer would pick up if the triggers were starting to happen, and we give her some type of nonverbal sign. So she realized that's what was happening. She could refocus on her communication and move forward. So we talk about what areas of communication they may need help with moving forward and where could they access this help. Because your job as a coach is to get them thinking differently. It's not necessarily to teach them those skills, but certainly you can help them find a place to go for that. And then again, the whole practice. What situations may they be in to practice these skills in a safe environment? So I've had numerous people come back to me who've been much happier and successful in their interactions. And the one I shared with you was the person who's feeling totally disempowered, and it was really around a lot of business issues because her and her former partner had been in business together. They'd felt really beat up after they'd been through mediation. And so through coaching about effective communication and allowing an opportunity to give her some time to practice and think about it, she came back to the next coaching session, and I would say she felt much more empowered versus being overpowered. So that was a really positive situation for me.
I like what you said in terms of taking the long view. So, look 5 years out, 10 years out, and reflect back on your present actions. And I've heard, sort of the analogy as well. Think about having a conversation with your kids 10, 15 years from now, and you're advising them on their relationships and everything like that, and things that you may have done differently. Well, if we put ourselves in the future now, we can elicit those behavioral changes in the present rather than living with regrets later.
Absolutely.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Glenys. In closing, is there maybe one lesson or one thing that you'd like people to take from this that they feel that they should absolutely remember?
One lesson I think is that communication requires skills, and we all have the ability to learn those skills, and we all have the ability to make those changes. So I just want people to understand, never give up. There's always different ways to do it.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Glenys. And then if somebody wants to get a hold of you and hire you for your services, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way for them to reach out to me would be through text. And my text number is 780-808-5779.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Glenys.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You too. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on the Taking the High Road podcast. Be sure to stay tuned for the next episode. And if you're interested in learning more about the companion book available from Amazon, visit highroadindivorce.com. Again, that's highroadindivorce.com. Thanks again.